Hey, I'm Cameron McKenzie. I'm the editor-in-chief over at theserverside.com. You can follow me on Twitter at CameronMCNZ. And right now I wanted to talk to you about git stash and how you can use that git stash command to, well, shelve your changes and also take those changes and pop them back onto your Git working tree when you want to bring them back. So everything you want to know about git stash and how to use it, I'm going to tell you. Now I put together this little example. I've got a folder called git stash. That doesn't have anything to do with the command. I just put that in there for a nice description. And it's got two files, flaky.html and solid.html. You can see them here. This file is solid is the content of solid.html, and this might get flaky is the content of flaky.html. Now I want to make these all part of a Git repository. So I'm going to open up a bash prompt here, and I'm going to initialize a Git repository. I'm going to add all these files to the index, and then I'll do a git commit. Okay, life is good. Now, you've just brought this code in. Maybe maybe you even did a pull. You've just done a commit. You've got a nice clean workspace. And all of a sudden, you've got this flaky.html file here. It's got some, you want to do some experimenting here. You got some ideas of how to get this code to work. But this code is highly experimental. You're taking a lot of chances. Maybe you're updating a number of different files as you try and experiment with this latest feature that you're trying to get in. And as you're doing it, some code compiles, some doesn't, right? That's all part of the creative process of doing development. Now let's imagine you're doing that. I haven't committed anything yet, but I've certainly made some changes. And all of a sudden your boss comes to you and says, we need a fix for the solid.html file. We need you to get a fix in right away. The file's solid, but there's a little bit of a change that you need to make to it. Well, that's great. I can start working on this file, but what do I do with the flaky file? If I commit the flaky file or even make the commit part of the fix, well, I might end up checking some code in that doesn't compile, some code that doesn't merge well with other users. So that's not a good idea. I don't want to commit the code, but at the same time, if I do a git reset hard, I'm actually going to lose my changes because a git reset hard will just step me back and step me out of all the changes that I've made since the last commit happened. Well, if you want to essentially do a reset hard on your local workspace, but at the same time store the temporary changes that you've made since the last commit, that's when you do a git stash. So I do this git stash command, and all of a sudden the changes that I made to this flaky file, they're saved locally somewhere in the hidden .git folder of the repository. You can see it up there. But at the same time, all of my files have been reset back to where they were when the last commit happened. And in fact, it doesn't look like that file's changed, but look at what happens if I click on this notepad tool. It actually says, hey, you know what, behind the scenes, someone has changed this file, and that someone is Git. So it says, do you want to reload this file? If I click yes, all of a sudden it takes me right back to where I started off from. And so that's the reset hard that's happening behind the scenes. In fact, if I go over here and I say git reflog, you can actually see that it's registered the git stash command as an actual reset. Now the idea is you would then go in and you would say, okay, this file is solid, but it needs a fix. So this is a fix for the solid file. I click save there. Over here in the bash command here, what do? I add that. I say, hey, the fix is in. And now I've actually gone and committed this file. So the fix is now done. But what about this flaky file? What about all those changes that I'd made before, but I'd lost because I had to go in and update this solid file? Well, the good thing is all of those are still available in the stash. So if I go back to the bash command here and say git stash pop, all of a sudden it says, hey, you know what? We actually saw that there was something about that flaky file in the stash there. We're going to bring that file in. It also mentions that now that it's brought that in, that's going to be a modified file in your file system because it's made changes to it. And right here it says this might get flaky. The change we made, what was it? Something about the code was experimental. Look, if I click on Notepad++ after doing that pop, it says, hey, someone's changed the file underneath the covers, and that someone was Git. I click yes, and now it takes me back. This is highly experimental. That's the content that was pushed in to the stash just before I went in and I started doing the fix. Now, if I go over to this fix file, that's still left the same way that it is. That's the same way that it was after the commit. And so here I can always do the git add dot and then do the git commit -m and say both the fix and this git stash together. And now we've created a commit. We've got all the changes that were there in that experimental work that we did. We've got the fix, and it's all merged together. We didn't lose any of our code, even though we kind of went back and forth from one commit to another. And the way that all happened was by using that git stash command. So it's a pretty useful command. Use it when you need it. And there you go. Those are the ins and outs of the git stash command. If you enjoyed this tutorial, why don't you head over to theserverside.com. Got all sorts of tutorials on Git, GitHub, GitLab, DevOps, and anything that has to do with enterprise software development, really. If you're interested in my personal antics, I'm at CameronMCNZ on Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube.